Hello everyone and welcome to Sunburned. Albino ranks every Danganronpa execution from worst to best. This video is specifically about the games, and we're going to do the three main ones: Trigger Happy Havoc, Goodbye Despair, and Killing Harmony. Watching people get executed can be a heartbreaking or cathartic experience, depending on who's getting shafted. Did they deserve it? Is it a tragedy? Do I even care? This franchise is known for offing high school students in over-the-top ways. Let's see which ones were noteworthy. Story spoilers for all three games, obviously. Also, drink every time I say the word execution if you're feeling adventurous/suicidal. Starting from worst and working our way to best. Number worst, Headmaster. The worst execution in Danganronpa is the Headmasters. Our opening cinematic for the first Danganronpa starts off with the structured slang of a dude we don't know or care about in the moment, which makes it leave next to no impact. Later you think back and you're like, oh, that must have been that guy. But even then it's kind of a whatever situation, and the execution itself, just launching a little rocket into space and letting it fall back down, no explosion or nothing, is a letdown. Plus, why is he a skeleton afterwards? Did he get eaten by space piranhas? You were in the rocket the whole time. I don't know how your skin disintegrated, but it's not worth overanalyzing. Number 20, Makoto. The attempted execution of Makoto in the first game is the second worst in my mind, not only because it straight up doesn't work, but because it's just the same one they used on Kyoko, and an uninspired execution is a boring execution. Then again, executing the ultimate lucky student was probably an impossible task any way you slice it. Lucky students don't get murdered. If anything, they kill themselves. Number 19, Junko. Wow, this is not looking good for the first game's execution rep. Junko dies in this game by simply reliving all the other prior executions up to that point. Living being the operative word, because how the hell are you surviving all this shit until the final thing? This chick gets dropped from space in a rocket ship, pelted with baseballs, spun around in circles at the speed of light, lit on fire and slammed into by a fire truck, smashed in the head 100 times by an excavator, and she still all smiles by the end when she finally gets mushed by the Kyoko death trap. What a psycho. A borderline invincible psycho. I don't think it's all that creative, and while I suspend my disbelief for a lot of these executions, this one just feels like a waste of time when the first 6 things that happen to her don't do anything. Number 18, Mondo. Another first game execution. This one's a combination of dumb and gross. The leader of the ultimate biker gang has some neat potential when it comes to getting killed on a motorcycle, but here they just elected to turn him into a hamster before turning him into butter. He just rides the bike in circles at increasing speed until he apparently breaks the sound barrier and his body liquefies, and then they serve him as a tub of Mondo butter, which is disgusting. Like, I don't care how drunk I get, Monokuma, I'm not eating that. Number 17, Usami. At the start of the second game, Monokuma appears and just shreds Usami with a Gatling gun. That's about it. She has spares, so it's barely an execution. She basically just gets gunned down in the street and then pops up again like nothing happened, although there's some psychological abuse that comes with it, but yeah, basically meaningless. Number 16, Alter Ego. I'm not out here like, oh, it's an AI, who cares? I think as a remnant of Chihiro, it's possible to care about the well-being of an image on a laptop. The amount of times Chihiro gets pounded before our very eyes is enough to make any man sigh, but this first game execution really does just come down to smashing an object over and over again, so it's not that creative. It being done with an excavator livens it up, though. Now, if only we could do this to ChatGPT and whichever program's flooding the internet with AI art, but keep the deepfake voiceover memes. They've earned some amnesty. Number 15, Mikan. I barely even understand what's happening in this execution from the second game. Mikan is laying in bed, and then all of a sudden she's straddling a giant mannequin arm that gets injected with rocket juice and blasts off into the sky like Team Rocket. She doesn't even die on screen. She could still be alive for all I know. Her death was basically a magic carpet ride on steroids. Pretty sure Jasmine would have lived that. At least you can see her underwear for like 2 seconds if you're into that. I never liked Mikan, so I'm not, but I can still do some pervs a favor out here. Number 14, Junko Digital. I'm not sure it's an execution if the person fights back. This is more like a boss battle, but I've been known to rank those anyway, so might as well include this from the second game. AI can be a real bitch, especially if that bitch is Junko, who like all giants is slow for no reason, and Usami does a great job making her titties jiggle with her rainbow bondage wand, but the fight isn't very impressive. Number 13, Gundam. Pretty sure this is how Mufasa died. In the second game, Gundam says goodbye to his 4 dark devas of destruction and meets a stampede of wildlife. He makes a big show of rapidly drawing some kind of mystical circle on the ground and finishes it just in time to get trampled anyway. I don't know if it was a spell so all these winged critters could come take him to Gundam heaven, but I was expecting him to launch like a spirit bomb or something, but then he just dies regardless and it feels like a letdown. Sad points for leaving behind 4 very sorrowful hamsters. Number 12, Teru Teru. As the first main execution of the second game, I like when they started off by clamping the chain around the murderer's neck and dragging them to where they want to take them. I just think that really immediately sets the tone for how violent and unyielding it's going to be. They do the same thing with Leon in the first game, and it kind of jazzes you up for what's next. In Teru Teru's case, it's a bit wackier and less realistic than I'd like. Don't get me wrong, I like an over-the-top execution, and shooting humongo missiles at a chef that explode into seasonings and baking materials would work for me thematically, except that the explosions somehow don't kill him outright. Like, these are explosive bullet bills getting launched at this man. He should be dead after the first one. The helicopter then lifts him over the top of a volcano and drops him in to get turned into a chicken tender or something, which is what actually kills him. Number 11, Kaito. The first V3 execution of this list, I do think that game tried to up the creativity of its death sentences, but it didn't quite work with this one. Kaito's is basically the Headmaster's, aka the worst one, except the rocket burrows through the Earth before it launches into space, and then if I remember correctly, Kaito dies early because he took poison or something to rob the mastermind of the satisfaction of killing him before the rocket falls back to the ground. That's all well and good for a story theme, but it makes for a lame execution as a viewer. It even says execution failed after he dies early, and I feel like that's correct. Number 10, Korikyo. Another V3, Korikyo's execution is a little more sinister than all the other ones because they actually kill him twice. It's quite rude. First they spin him around a bunch, then they drop him into a melting pot and burn him alive. His ghost flies out through the smoke, meets the spirit of his dead sister who he was so in love with he had made her a part of his personality, and then just when it seems like they're going to be reunited, Monokuma appears and throws salt at his ghost, melting him away. Not only does Monokuma do that, but Korikyo's sister is tossing salt at him too. That's got to sting in more ways than one. So not only is he executed, but he's denied an afterlife too. This man was born anew for like 10 seconds and then got the equivalent of acid splashed on his face till he ceased to exist. He 100% deserves it after what he did, but damn. Number 9, Celeste. This execution from the first game looks simple from the outset, but it has a twist at the end they totally didn't have to do, but it's much appreciated. The execution treats her like a witch and burns her at the stake, and it's a slow burn. You watch the fire slowly creep up to her while she attempts to keep her composure, but then a fire truck rushes onto the scene, and instead of putting out the fire, it jumps off a ramp and slams into her at full speed. It's not like you thought it was going to put out the fire, given that this is an execution, but to be killed by something that would otherwise generally come to your aid in this situation is a cruel sort of poetry that isn't lost on me. It's a great moment, and when execution discourse comes up, people always talk about this one. Number 8, Gonta. Back to V3, Gonta's execution is a nice combination of simple and ridiculous. Being killed by the bugs he spent his life studying as the ultimate entomologist, tied to a post and pelted with these robotic wasps. In Onslaught, he initially survives because he's a big, strong hunk of a dumbass man before one of the Mono Kids gives birth to an Omega Wasp that charges straight for him and throws a bug punch that slices through him and the post he was tied to, barely having time to feel the impact before Gonta and the Omega Wasp are lit on fire by a flamethrower. This man got poisoned, impaled, and burned to death. What a guy. I don't like the Mono Kids in V3. I feel like the subplot of them dying during every execution takes away from it, but this one is still good. Number 7, Kyoko. Kyoko's version of this execution from the first game delivers all the right notes that Makoto's mildly fails to recapture. She's seated in front of Monokuma, pantomiming a lesson on the chalkboard, and has to keep her head facing forward while on a conveyor belt that is slowly carrying her backwards towards a crusher that pounds the ground every few seconds as she inches closer toward it. You can see in her face the unease that mounts as every crusher impact gets louder and louder, and it's fantastic for building tension. She's also a character that everyone is supposed to care about by this point in the game, having been a central figure in all of the events that have occurred, so her execution means more as a result and is harder to stomach. Number 6, Tsumugi and the Academy. The final act of V3, Kibo goes Super Saiyan Turbo mode and destroys the whole damn complex, and Monokuma and the Mastermind along with it. As far as spectacle is concerned, this one can't be beat. They try-harded the hell out of it, with Kibo zipping around everywhere, unleashing his Mega Man blaster on the world. The only letdown is how Tsumugi just dies by a falling rock while waving. I know it's a callback to Junko's death in the first game, but I would have preferred she take a laser blast to the face or get hit by a special beam cannon. The destruction of the facility is top tier though, and Kibo blowing himself up to crack through the seemingly impenetrable shield walls so the rest could escape is a good last act. Number 5, Kirumi. Kirumi's execution in V3 is different because it's the only one that gives the recipient hope to escape it. A thorny vine is brought down, and if you look up you can see a little light at the end of the tunnel that looks like a way out. So Kirumi climbs and climbs, each grasp of the vine stabbing thorns thorns into her palms and slashing her fingers, but she keeps climbing. As she gets closer to the top, they introduce saw blades that cut at her shoulders and back, basically making mincemeat out of her as she continues her upward trajectory, but even somehow making it through all of that, she reaches up to the light, only to find that it's a crudely drawn picture of the sky and sun, and she's still blocked underground. The vine snaps, she falls all the way back down and dies on impact. That's a rough one. I didn't care too much about Kirumi. She was written as an impossible character who, as the ultimate maid, was capable of basically anything, like overthrowing governments. I wouldn't be surprised if it was said that she could beat Superman in a one-on-one fistfight, so she was kinda whatever, but even she couldn't escape her fate, and this fate was pretty rude. Number 4, Peiko. Peiko Pekoyama, the ultimate swordswoman in the second game, is at least given the honor of not going down without a fight, even if that fight is completely scripted because her arms have strings on them and she's getting puppeteered like Pinocchio by Monokuma. She starts slicing and dicing like someone worthy of the title of Ultimate Swordswoman, but her master, Fuyuhiko, is weaving through the battlefield to try and save her, which seems kind of dangerous when she's not in control of her own sword swings. Eventually, one of the puppet enemies pops up directly in front of Fuyuhiko, and Peiko turns around and slashes upwards at it, not knowing he's directly behind, and he gets grazed by the blade across his entire face. She drops to her knees, holds him close to her, and then allows herself to be stabbed about 1,000,000 times. Fuyuhiko somehow lives that, which is insane, given that he must have taken at least a few stabs as collateral, but I guess the ultimate Yakuza is made of stronger stuff than the average person, even if he's like 3 feet tall. Number 3, Leon. Here we go with the top 3, and we have the first main execution from the first game to show viewers exactly who they're messing with. Leon gets dragged away by a neck clamp, tied to a post, and subjected to death by 1,000 balls. It's a simple execution for the ultimate baseball star, but still a memorable and classic one. I think it has a lot to do with how it's shot, like the camera work and the lighting go out of their way to make it as dark and impactful as possible, when some other executions just want to be goofy. It's a winner. Number 2, Kaede. We've got the first execution from V3, where they killed my favorite character and she didn't even deserve it because Tsumugi fucking cheated, that cheating fucking bitch. As with all first executions, it starts the classic way of getting dragged by the neck to wherever you're going, and then I would call Kaede's execution a little more violent than most of the others. Hung by the neck with only her tiptoes supporting her, she is swung around like a rag doll and made to play a giant piano with her feet. You may already imagine this, but slowly losing oxygen from being hung is not fun, and in this case, I think you'd actually pray for a neck snap while you're getting jerked around by this thing. It's surprising it doesn't happen. In the end, she passes out, and then the massive spikes inside the piano lids slam down on top of her. In the moment, it's devastating because she is us, she was the protagonist, but when things are revealed later about how Kaede wasn't actually the one who killed Rantaro, adding unfair to that concoction makes it taste even more bitter. Number 1, Chiaki. The best execution in Danganronpa is Chiaki and Monami from the second game. Chiaki might be recognizable gamer bait, given that she's the ultimate gamer, and thus all of us are supposed to immediately fall in love with her, but that doesn't mean it didn't work. What I appreciate about her execution is that it isn't just one game that the thing is centered around, they gave it layers, they made it multifaceted. First, her and Monami's clones are shot at by a tank in a similar fashion to Space Invaders, then they're chased by a giant Pac-Man until finally they're trapped by falling Tetris pieces. It's kind of like Kirumi's in that you might trick yourself into thinking there's hope for escape, but everything seems to go according to plan as Monokuma chases them exactly where he wants them to go. I also like the concept of a double execution because when Monami is the first one to get smashed by a Tetris piece, Chiaki is visibly affected by it, and if you're looking at it through the lens of someone who wants to see ultimate despair, that'll get the job done. Other executions might be more affecting or more poetic, but this one fires on all cylinders and doesn't slack in any regard. Well, that's gonna do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Watch all my other videos and be filled with either hope or despair, and I'll see you guys next time.